Most subway security guards wouldn't have recognized the chemical attack indicators when passengers began collapsing with suspicious symptoms in the downtown underground station during the busy morning commute. But Maria Santos identified the chemical weapon deployment patterns, CBRN exposure protocols, and mass casualty response that revealed she wasn't just transit security, she was a former Marine Corps CBRN specialist whose chemical warfare training had prepared her for biological and chemical attacks in combat zones where such weapons were daily threats. It was 8:23 a.m. on a typical Wednesday morning at Central Station, one of the city's busiest subway hubs. Thousands of commuters were making their way through the underground corridors, heading to work, school, and appointments that would define their day. The familiar sounds of train announcements, footsteps, and conversations echoed through the tiled tunnels. Maria Santos was conducting her regular security patrol through the main concourse, greeting familiar faces among the daily commuters who had come to know her as the friendly but vigilant guard who always seemed to notice everything. During her 4 years protecting the transit system, she had built relationships with vendors, commuters, and fellow security staff who appreciated her calm professionalism and unusual attention to detail. But as she walked past the central kiosk at exactly 8:23 a.m., something made her pause. The first passenger stumbled near the north entrance, and Maria's instincts, honed by years of experience most people couldn't imagine, immediately went on high alert. Within minutes, more passengers began showing distressing symptoms: coughing, difficulty breathing, skin irritation, and a distinctive sweet smell that most people wouldn't recognize, but that hit Maria like a punch to the gut. Her training kicked in immediately, not her civilian security training, but something much more specialized and deadly serious. She had smelled this before, in places where chemical weapons weren't theoretical threats but real dangers that could kill entire units in minutes. The muscle memory from another life, another uniform, another mission, where recognizing this smell meant the difference between life and death. While other security personnel and bystanders assumed they were witnessing a medical emergency or possible gas leak, Maria Santos was conducting a rapid threat assessment using protocols most civilian security had never heard of. Her mind automatically shifted into a mode that her fellow guards had never seen, the focused, analytical mindset of someone trained to identify and respond to weapons designed to kill masses of people. CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. In the Marine Corps, these 4 letters represented some of the most dangerous warfare scenarios imaginable. Maria had trained extensively in recognizing, responding to, and surviving attacks using weapons of mass destruction. She had studied the effects of nerve agents, blister agents, choking agents, and blood agents until she could identify them by symptom patterns alone. The pattern of symptoms she was observing, the timing of onset, the way the chemical agent was affecting people at different distances from what she suspected was the point of release, everything pointed to an intentional chemical attack in the subway system. This wasn't accidental exposure or a mechanical failure. Her first action wasn't to call for medical help or evacuate the area using standard civilian protocols. It was to identify the specific chemical agent, determine the scope of contamination, and implement immediate countermeasures to prevent the attack from spreading throughout the entire subway network. This wasn't a medical emergency that civilian first responders could handle. This was chemical warfare in the heart of America's transportation infrastructure, and it required military-level expertise to prevent a catastrophe that could kill hundreds or thousands of people. Maria immediately began implementing chemical attack response protocols with the precision of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario in the most dangerous environments on Earth. Her movements became crisp, purposeful, guided by muscle memory developed in places where hesitation meant death. "Central Command, this is Santos," she radioed, using terminology and tone that surprised the dispatch operators who had never heard her speak with such military authority. "We have a possible CBRN incident at Central Station, implementing immediate containment protocols. I need hazmat teams, decontamination units, and federal CBRN response, now." She began directing people away from the contamination zone, using evacuation techniques designed for chemical warfare scenarios rather than standard emergency procedures. Her voice carried a calm authority that made people listen and obey without question, even as panic began to spread through the station. "Ma'am, you need to move away from this area immediately," she told a woman who was trying to help other passengers, gently but firmly guiding her towards safety. "Cover your nose and mouth with any cloth you have. Avoid skin contact with any surfaces in this area, and proceed directly to the north exit. Do not stop. Do not help others. Get yourself to safety first." Transit Authority Supervisor James Mitchell, who had worked with Maria for 3 years, watched in amazement as she coordinated an evacuation with military precision he had never seen from her before. "Maria, how do you know these procedures? This isn't in any of our training manuals." "Because I've done this before," she replied, helping to guide passengers to safety while simultaneously assessing the chemical contamination pattern with the trained eye of someone who had learned to read invisible threats. Fallujah, 2019. Chemical attack on our forward operating base. 60 Marines exposed, but we contained it because we knew what we were doing, because we had trained for this exact scenario over and over until it became instinct. What happened next demonstrated the difference between civilian emergency response and military chemical warfare training. Maria Santos transformed the subway station into a controlled decontamination zone using techniques she had learned during Marine Corps CBRN specialization training. She established contamination zones, decontamination procedures, and evacuation routes that prevented the chemical attack from claiming lives. Using her knowledge of chemical agent behavior, she identified the most likely deployment point and worked to contain the spread of contamination. Her training in chemical warfare defense allowed her to recognize that this was likely a nerve agent or blister agent, weapons designed to cause maximum casualties in confined spaces. "The ventilation system is spreading the contamination," she explained to arriving federal CBRN teams. "We need to shut down air circulation immediately and establish positive pressure barriers to prevent dispersal to other parts of the subway network." CBRN specialist Dr. Sarah Chen, who arrived with the federal hazmat team, was impressed by Maria's technical expertise. "You're implementing graduate-level chemical warfare containment procedures. Where did you learn this?" "Marine Corps CBRN School, Camp Lejeune," Maria replied, continuing to coordinate evacuation procedures while wearing protective equipment she knew how to use effectively. 3 deployments in chemical threat environments. You learn fast when your life and your Marines' lives depend on getting it right. As the crisis continued, Maria's true background became clear to everyone responding to the chemical attack. She wasn't just a transit security guard who had picked up some emergency procedures through online training or civilian courses. She was a decorated Marine Corps CBRN specialist whose service record included some of the most dangerous chemical warfare assignments in recent military history. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had served 3 deployments in Iraq and Syria as part of the Marine Corps' specialized CBRN defense teams. She had responded to chemical weapon attacks against both military and civilian targets, conducted decontamination operations in active combat zones, and had been decorated twice for her expertise in protecting Marines from weapons of mass destruction in environments where such weapons were used regularly. Her military training included advanced chemical warfare detection, biological agent identification, radiological contamination assessment, and nuclear fallout procedures, exactly the specialized knowledge needed to respond to the kind of terrorist attack that had just targeted the subway system. She had trained with equipment that most civilian first responders had never seen, using techniques developed by military scientists who studied how to survive the worst weapons humanity had ever created. "I've handled sarin gas exposure in Syria, mustard agent contamination in Iraq, and improvised chemical devices that insurgents used against civilian populations," Maria explained to the federal response team as they worked together to secure the scene, her voice carrying the weight of experiences that had shaped her understanding of human evil and resilience. "Syria taught me that chemical weapons aren't just military problems, they're weapons that terrorists use against innocent people. Today proved that the war followed us home." The chemical attack on the subway system was later determined to be a chlorine gas deployment designed to cause mass casualties during rush hour. Maria's immediate recognition and professional response had prevented what federal investigators estimated could have been hundreds of casualties in one of the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil. The difference Maria's expertise made was dramatic and life-saving in ways that became clear only as the full scope of the attack was understood. Passengers who might have died from prolonged chemical exposure received immediate medical attention guided by someone who understood chemical warfare medicine at a level that civilian emergency responders simply couldn't match. The contamination that could have spread throughout the subway network was contained using military-grade procedures that Maria had learned protecting Marines in combat zones where chemical weapons were part of daily life. Her rapid identification of the specific agent allowed medical teams to administer the correct antidotes and treatments immediately, rather than wasting precious time on trial and error. Federal investigators later determined that Maria's rapid response had prevented the chemical attack from affecting an estimated 3,000 additional commuters who would have been exposed if the contamination had spread through the ventilation system to connecting tunnels and subway cars. The attack had been planned to coincide with rush hour specifically to maximize casualties among people who had no training, no protection, and no escape route in the underground system. The passengers who were treated immediately after exposure recovered fully because Maria's CBRN training had guided medical responders to use the correct antidotes and decontamination procedures for the specific chemical agent involved. Without her expertise, many of them would have suffered permanent injuries or death from chemical burns and respiratory damage. "You saved lives today," Dr. Chen told Maria as hazmat teams completed the decontamination process, her voice filled with professional respect for someone whose knowledge had prevented a catastrophe. "Without your military chemical warfare training, this would have been a mass casualty event that would have changed how Americans think about public transportation forever." "That's what we train for," Maria replied, watching as the last affected passengers received medical clearance and were reunited with their families. Whether it's protecting Marines in a combat zone or protecting commuters in a subway system, the mission is the same: identify the threat, contain the damage, save lives. The enemy changed, but the mission stayed the same. The chemical attack on the subway system triggered a massive federal investigation involving the FBI, Homeland Security, and military CBRN specialists. Maria's role in containing the attack and her military expertise became central to understanding how the incident had been successfully managed. Federal authorities were particularly interested in Maria's assessment of the attack methodology and her recommendations for improving civilian CBRN response capabilities. Her military experience provided insights that civilian emergency responders had never considered. The Department of Homeland Security offered Maria a position as a CBRN consultant for transportation security, recognizing that her combination of military chemical warfare expertise and civilian security experience was exactly what the country needed for terrorism. Preparedness. "Your military training isn't just valuable, it's essential," Homeland Security Director Patricia Williams explained. Chemical attacks on civilian infrastructure require military-level expertise to prevent mass casualties. The attack also led to nationwide improvements in transit system CBRN preparedness, with Maria's response protocols being adopted by subway systems across the country. Maria's story became a powerful example of how military veterans continue serving their communities in critical ways that often go unrecognized until crisis strikes. The chemical attack response highlighted how specialized military training translates directly to civilian security needs. Local and national media coverage focused on how a Marine Corps CBRN specialist working in transit security had prevented a terrorist chemical attack from becoming a mass casualty event. Families of passengers credited her with saving their loved ones from chemical weapons exposure. The Transit Authority implemented new policies to identify and utilize military CBRN expertise among their security personnel, recognizing that veterans with specialized warfare training could provide capabilities that civilian security couldn't match. Maria's veteran status became a source of pride for the transit system and the community she served. Her combination of military chemical warfare expertise and civilian security experience represented the kind of specialized protection that modern transportation infrastructure needed. Maria's successful response to the chemical attack highlighted the broader importance of veteran expertise in civilian security roles. Her story demonstrated how military CBRN training provided crucial capabilities for responding to terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure. Veterans Affairs representatives worked with transportation authorities to develop programs that would identify and utilize military chemical warfare expertise among transit security personnel. Maria's experience became a model for how CBRN specialists could transition their skills to civilian terrorism prevention roles. The program expanded to other major cities, with transit systems actively recruiting veterans with CBRN military specializations for security and emergency response positions. Military CBRN training doesn't become irrelevant when you leave service, Maria explained to other veterans considering civilian security careers. The threats we train for in combat zones are the same threats that target civilian infrastructure. Our expertise is needed here at home. Today, Maria Santos serves as the Transit Authority's Chief CBRN Security Specialist, a position that combines her subway security experience with her military chemical warfare expertise. She has developed chemical attack response protocols for transportation systems nationwide, improving America's ability to respond to terrorism targeting civilian infrastructure. Her story represents thousands of military veterans who continue serving their communities in civilian roles that utilize specialized military training most people never see. Sometimes the person checking your subway ticket carries expertise in defending against weapons of mass destruction, knowledge gained protecting America in the world's most dangerous places. Maria's transition from Marine Corps CBRN specialist to subway security to transportation terrorism prevention demonstrates how military training enhances civilian security in ways that save lives. Her commitment to protecting people, whether Marines in combat zones or commuters in subway systems, reflects the enduring service ethic that veterans bring to their communities. The mission never ends, Maria reflects, looking at the subway system she now helps protect with military-grade expertise. Whether you're defending Marines against chemical weapons or protecting families from terrorist attacks, the goal is the same: use your training, stay alert to threats, and never let the enemy win. That's what we do. For Maria Santos, serving others isn't just a career, it's a calling that continued from the battlefields of Iraq and Syria to the subway systems of American cities, proving that the skills learned defending America abroad are essential for protecting America at home.